There were countless accidents that took place in the former Soviet Union, but they were all kept silent. Just like entire cities all over the country were top secret on account of the research going on at them. This is the story of one of them. In the late 1970s, I was stationed at a facility several thousand kilometers outside of Leningrad. I was in charge of overseeing security for the facility, which was classified as top secret. I had been approved for the job not only because I was a party member, but I had family connections in Moscow. As such, I reported to Moscow. The facility itself was dull and unremarkable on the outside. But that was just the tip of the iceberg, as you say, for it went several stories deep underground, which was where the top secret part happened. That was where the top medical experts and biologists from the Academy of Sciences conducted research and experiments. This was when scientists were among the most revered members of society. They had put a man into space and constructed the atom bomb. There were no heights they could not scale. The events of April 1986 would put an eternal blemish on that idea in the public's mind. But I lost my faith in them on the day of August 30th, 1979. I had just arrived at work when I was summoned by Dr. Petrov, the director of the facility. The guards at the various checkpoints had waved me through as usual, but otherwise it was almost empty. According to Petrov, there had been some accident during the night, and while he assured me everything was under control, he was under orders from the Ministry of Health to place the area under lockdown. All non-essential personnel had either been sent home or told not to come in by the shift chief. This had happened before, so I was not alarmed in any way. Petrov seemed to be his normal self, but I noticed he was perspiring quite a bit, and when he lit a cigarette, I thought I noticed what looked like a bandage on his arm under his lab coat. "Everything is under control, Vasily Alexander, just a precaution," he said, before turning out of his office and heading towards the elevator that went straight to the underground labs and offices. I went the opposite way, in the direction of my office. When I arrived, I noticed my aide Nikolai was not at his desk. Unusual, but not unheard of. Most likely he had been sent home as well. So I busied myself with the usual security reports, letters, memos, and other matters that I always tried to take care of early. I was accompanied by my typical amount of cigarettes and coffee. It was almost lunchtime when the phone started buzzing. The phone, as in the special red phone on the corner of my desk, that connects me to both the secure lines underground and to my superiors in Moscow. From the button lighting up on the phone's console, the call was coming from underground. "Yes?" There was silence on the other end of the line. "Hello?" Still nothing. "Is there a problem?" I heard something that sounded like a grunt or wheeze that was followed by a loud clattering noise. But in the background, I distinctly heard the sound of a person screaming before it immediately stopped. "Dr. Petrov?" When there was no further response, I hung up, left my office, and walked quickly towards the facility's atrium where 2 army guards normally on duty were. Today was no exception, as both Victor and Anatoly were at their normal posts, outside at the front. "What is going on below?" I asked, ignoring the usual pleasantries. "I am not aware of anything aside from what Dr. Petrov informed me, Comrade Ivanov. Is there a problem?" Anatoly asked, clearly confused. "I received a call in my office a few moments ago, the secure line. No answer, but it sounded like something was happening. I heard a person screaming. We've heard nothing out of the ordinary all morning. In fact, no sign of anything." I paused for a moment, deep in thought. "Alright, Victor, you come with me. We're going down there. Anatoly, stay here, and if we don't return immediately, contact our superiors and inform them something is wrong." He nodded, without saying a word. Turning to face Victor, I continued, "I'll be right back. There's something I need from my office first." Without another word, I went back upstairs, took off my suit jacket, and opened the bottom drawer of my desk and took the pistol that I had plenty of experience using, but never fired on the job, and the holster it came with. I put the holster on, and made sure the gun was ready to go and loaded before sliding it in said holster. Carefully putting my suit jacket back on, I returned to the atrium. "Alright, let's go," was all I said to Victor before I entered the code into the elevator. We stood in the secure, windowless block for what seemed like an eternity. I didn't say a word to Victor, who had a distinguished career in the army, and like everyone else at the facility, had ties to powerful people in Moscow. This was one of the most revered medical research facilities in the Soviet Union. Everything was top of the line, so I couldn't imagine what was the problem. The elevator eventually stopped at the underground section, the doors opening silently. When it did, Victor and I gazed at the vast, climate-controlled corridor with both awe and panic. Several doctors and other personnel, among the most distinguished in the Union, were lying motionless on the ground. All had suffered some injury and had bled on the ground, but some had pieces of flesh ripped from their body and were marked by what looked like bite marks from an animal attack. My stomach lurched as I stepped carefully into the corridor, Victor behind me. With one hand resting nervously on my gun, I stepped around the bodies of what had once been my colleagues. What happened? I managed to ask him. I don't know. I looked back and saw that the normally calm and unaffected Belarusian looked pale. I've never seen anything like this. I haven't either. We kept on, trekking through the vast labyrinth of hallways, corridors, labs, offices, and other rooms, but we found no other bodies, aside from the ones near the secure elevator. Each step we made seemed far too loud in the underground corridors. I suddenly felt the sense of being boxed in, how the whole area was silently packed in on every side by layers of dirt. There was no telling how much time had passed, but after what seemed like hours, we turned a corridor and found what looked like an operating room. But what caught my attention was the figure in the lab coat huddled on the opposite side of the room, back turned to us. Dr. Petrov? I asked. The figure turned and it was Dr. Petrov, or at least it looked like him. His previously ruddy skin had turned deathly pale and his eyes were glassy and empty. I also noticed that his lab coat was stained with blood on the arm, where I had thought there was a bandage earlier. But the most striking thing was the walk. He shuffled towards us like a drunkard, arms outstretched, like he was reaching for something. Dr. Petrov, I said louder. He didn't answer, but emitted some pained moan. He got closer and closer to us. I wasn't sure what exactly to do, but instinct took over and I knew we had to get out of there. Run! I yelled at Victor and he immediately scrambled out of the room. I was right behind him, feeling what had previously been Dr. Petrov lumbering behind me, and I slammed the door just as his arms were reaching out to grab me. I pushed all my weight against the door as Petrov clumsily tried to force it open. I frantically looked around for something to block it. There was nothing in the hallway here. It was all climate controlled, sanitized, and secure. Here! Victor ran back, with some massive metal instrument that he shoved in the stainless steel door handle. Because the door opened inward, Petrov could not force his way out. The door rattling made me nervous, but it was secure. At least for now. Let's go, Victor said. I followed without saying a word, and we quickly went back the way we came. My heart was pounding in my chest as we walked. Each time we turned a corridor or passed a new room, I was terrified at what or who we'd see. But each time it was nothing. We were almost at the elevator when it happened. Victor and I were walking past a hallway when we heard something, the sound of movement coming closer towards us. As we both turned, we saw Alexei Povovich, a distinguished biologist, running towards us, his medical garb saturated with blood. He looked like his usual self, apart from the terror in his eyes. Get to the elevator now, he screamed. As I was doing just that, I saw what he was running from. A sea of people who moved and looked just like Petrov, all grey limbs, dead eyes, and bleeding wounds, a medley of groans. They lumbered after Alexei like a wounded animal, which I suppose is what they were. They weren't dead, but they didn't look living either. Victor and I sprinted to the elevator, the sound of those pursuing Alexei growing louder in the space. After a furious press of the button, we paused for a moment, unsure of what to do. I'll go take a look. I'll tell you when to press the button, I heard myself say before I stepped out into the corridor just outside the elevator. When I did, there was no sign of Alexei. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my heart, which was pounding far too loud for comfort. After an eternity, Alexei rounded a corner, but just as I was relieved to see him, he tripped and fell, and those pursuing him were almost on him. Without a conscious thought, I felt my gun being taken out of its holster and the sounds of it being fired echoed off the reinforced walls. Several people trying to grab Alexei were hit. Some stumbled and fell, others merely paused, while others fell and lay still. Regardless, I kept firing and it was enough for Alexei to escape unharmed. When he was almost inside the elevator, I yelled, "Press it!" before stepping inside myself. Alexei had just made it inside the doors when they closed and we began the slow ascent to the surface. As we did, I could hear the shuffling sounds and moans just outside the metal doors. Victor leaned against the wall and ran a hand through his hair. I took a similar pose, while Alexei's legs gave out completely and he slumped on the elevator floor. The sound of heavy breathing filled the elevator. "What happened?" I said to the technician once he caught his breath. "I do not know. We received a specimen from Moscow late in the night. Top secret. A body given to us for study. We thought it was dead, but it wasn't. It bit several of the staff who were quarantined down here. They were fine for a while, but they became infected and bit others just like they had been. Eventually, the entire staff working underground got it. I'm the only one who didn't because I was on a cigarette break when it happened." I didn't say a word, and when we returned to the surface, we found out Anatoly had done what we asked. Victor and I informed our superiors what we had seen, and Alexei told his story in detail to the security services. We were all closely interrogated and examined for contamination. There was never any formal conclusion of what happened, nor did we ever get the full version of events, but we all received a decoration and a promotion for our troubles. The army was called in, and somehow they took care of those contaminated. The families of Dr. Petrov and the others afflicted were informed there had been an accident. For their troubles, they were all posthumously awarded the highest decorations of the Soviet Union and honoured as heroes. The facility was quickly abandoned and sealed off soon after the incident, where it sits alone and forgotten, like so many others.